Yo guys, so I'm watching the 2018 EPT main event in Monte Carlo. There's 10 players left and there's a really interesting hand I want to go through. It's real sick. But first I want to address something on my last video, which I'll link in the description. It was Doug Polk bluffing Phil Ivey. Phil Ivey has a decision and he ends up looking for a live read. And I mentioned that Phil Ivey's looking for a live read, but I don't say what the specific read is, and I say that I can see it. And there are a lot of people getting salty about that. And so in the saltiness, it was kind of like split up into two camps. And I just want to address it quickly just so I don't have to like get into it on YouTube. There were some people saying, hey man, if you're bringing up live tells, why don't you just tell us what it is? Then maybe we'll believe you. Well, the reason I'm not going to tell you what it is, first of all, I make a lot of money coaching people with live tells. It's such a valuable thing. Even in the high stakes community, people are willing to pay a lot of money for it. Secondly, if it is a very high EV thing, I would prefer to choose who knows and who doesn't, because I like certain people, or I think certain people are going to do good things with their money. Thirdly, do it for yourself, you lazy information vultures. Come on, you don't get spoon-fed everything. How can you not be happy that some of the best poker players in the world are making free footage for you to watch on YouTube? You're still complaining about not getting enough information. Anyway, the second group of people saying, I don't see a live tell. How do you know it's a live tell? Phil Ivey is the king of live tells, and I just want to say, like, I was as well, or I am as well. It was kind of like my thing. I didn't really do too much work into like the game theory because I was breezing along, just knowing exploited poker and live tell poker. I could see what he was looking for, and I could see when he saw it, and I saw it on Doug's face. And I don't care if people believe me. What I'm saying is, hey guys, if you want to look for live tells, don't be perturbed by people saying that they don't exist, or don't be perturbed even by the fact that you might not be able to see it early on. When I was playing live poker for the first 2 years, I was looking at people constantly until I started finding patterns. You can't just expect to be as good as someone like Daniel Negreanu or Davide Katai within the first 2 minutes of looking at a clip. And don't shit on other people if you don't see it and other people do. So getting into this hand, let's see how it plays out. So we have Fernandez opening bottom with Queen Jack off. Joseniz defending sixes in the big blind. They're both pretty damn deep. So the stacks aren't super relevant at this point. Joseniz checks. He's going to be checking his entire range. Fernandez decides to c-bet, and he goes for, is it 65k? I think it's 65k. Definitely going to be doing this with potentially his entire range, depending on how he likes to play a specific few of his hands. He might decide to check back some ace highs. He might decide to check back some complete misses like 10-8 of clubs, those kind of hands. But a lot of people will just be c-betting 100%, folding the big blind off their king highs, the jack highs, and potentially just folding them off on future streets if they have ace highs or one pairs. So Joseniz calls and hits the turn. I'm going to pause the turn here. Actually, no, I'll show you what Joseniz does. And apologies, dude, if I'm saying your name wrong. I do not know what flag that is, so I'm not going to hazard a guess. Is that Hungarian, maybe? I don't know. So he tanks for a while, and he ends up leading the turn. And I thought about this for a really long time. My instant reaction was that I love it, and my end reaction is that I love it. I'm not a huge fan of the size. I think he could have gone a bit bigger. But here's why I like it. So when he turns a set, he's obviously got the best hand almost always. Loses a 5-2 suited if he opens that on the button, and 7-5 suited, which he will open on the button, maybe 7-5 off if he opens that on the button. He's essentially just trying to get as much value as he possibly can against overpairs and Queen X and some other middling hands. So what kind of hands can Fernandez have? He can have overpairs, he can have Queen X, he can have some 5X that might call the turn, so maybe like pocket 5s, 5-4 suited, ace 5 suited. He could have king 5 suited, he could have 4, maybe he could have pocket 7s. So many of these hands, I think every single one I just mentioned, apart from maybe king 5 specifically, and then obviously some like 10-5 suited might as well. All of them are going to be checking the turn. And here's actually a very reasonable situation, and theory-wise, like as well as exploitative-wise, where you might want to lead some turns. And this is a specific kind of board that, here's a concept to draw away from this hand. On boards, and you can use this in the micro stakes as well. On boards where your opponent can have a wide array of 1 pair plus straight draw combinations, so 3-5, pocket 5, 6-5, 4-5, any of those kind of hand, that has a very, very specific board to pay a lot of attention to, because very often what they're going to do is they'll call a bet, whereas they would usually check behind, and also they will probably fold the river if you do double or triple barrel on those kind of boards, because they're like, well, I've got a pair and a straight draw, I've got a pair and a straight draw, and then it bricks on the river, they're like, damn it, I've just got a pair, what do I do? So I'm not gonna spoon feed every single little nugget of information about those boards. If you watch my bankroll challenge, I have spoken about these specifics before, but it's very important to know what to do in different situations with different hands against different kind of boards. And it's very important to be able to have things like leading in your range, even if the game theory doesn't suggest it. Especially on micro stakes, you really do not need to care about balancing your check call range or your check raise range. You just need to be thinking about what range your opponent can have and how to exploit that. And honestly, even in a 5K tournament, I know it sounds like a lot of money, but these tournaments are so soft, you can still be thinking like that against all the recreational players and most of the bad to average professionals as well. Obviously, you need to be thinking a few things on the level above, but whatever. I think the size could be a bit bigger because it is a pair and straighted board, and I don't think he's ever folding a queen or an overpair, and I don't think there are enough combinations of 7s, 8s, 9s, sorry, not 7s, just 8s, 9s, 10s, and jacks, where they might fold to a bigger bet. I think it's much more prudent to target the other hands in his range with the bigger size. So we hit a gin river, the flush gets there, and we beat it. Queen has turned into trips. Beautiful. What do you do? Take a second, pause the video, and genuinely just decide what you would do here, because it's really interesting. And don't just watch these videos and just be like, oh, that is what is correct, because it doesn't matter what correct is really. It's not really what I'm trying to teach people. I'm trying to teach people how to think and make sure that you're thinking about the right things. So what do you think about here? You start thinking about what Fernandez's range can be and what your range is. You should hopefully already know that by the time you get to the river. So what can Fernandez has? He can have aces and kings. He can have queen x a lot. There's a lot of combinations of queen x. There's ace queen off, king queen off, queen jack off, queen 10, queen 9, queen 8 off, maybe even queen 7 off. And obviously you can have boats and queen deuce suited, maybe queen deuce off, maybe. And then he can also have some flushes. He can have some missed draws, maybe like ace 5, king 5 if he decides to call the turn. He can have some 1 pairs as well. And now you need to decide, how do you get the most value from this? I've given you hopefully enough time to pause it and think about it yourself. So here's the thing. I think if we check the big blind, Fernandez should be checking back his hand. I know that sounds extreme with trips, good kicker, but if you think about the range that we as the big blind would be leading the turn, it's really polarized when this river comes. So we could have maybe some king 5 floats, maybe some king jack of diamonds that have floated the flop and decided to lead the turn, or we can have strong hands, maybe like a set or 2 pair. Obviously the 2 pair would be counterfeits, that's a bad hand, and all of the floats like king 5 are either a really bad hand or a flush now, which is a really good hand. Or we can have a boat, so something like queen 6 or 6s or queen 3, anything like that. So it doesn't make any sense to bet something that's in the middle of that. You're only going to get called by the better things, and you're probably going to get like almost 100% folds from the worst things. So you have to decide, if we check here, would Fernandez check back too many hands? And a queen is a really crucial hand because there are so many combinations of queen x. And if you do manage to get a check raise for value here, that's potentially a huge pot and a really important part of the tournament. So here's how I would decide it. If I were on the table, I would hopefully know who Fernandez is. And if I thought he was a really good reg, I would bet. I would bet my 6s to try and get a call from a queen. If I thought he was a really bad average reg, I would check, because I think he would be more likely to not realize how polarized my range is and wouldn't want to look silly, especially on a TV table, and just check behind queen jack with the jack of diamonds. So let's assume that it's a a good reg, just for the sake of argument, because checking is you don't get to choose which size. Let's assume it's a good reg. Which size should we bet? Here's how I kind of split it up again. If he was a really, really good reg, I'd probably bet smaller, because he would know that we actually don't have too many bluffs at all. If he was like a kind of good reg, I'd probably bet bigger, because even kind of big regs, they don't like folding trips. But really good regs, they're not going to be paying attention to just their absolute hand strength. They're going to be paying attention to the relative hand strength compared to the different situations. The other hand you need to be paying attention to is probably the flush. How can you get the most value from a flush? Would he call a check raise if he does have flush? Because obviously all flushes are going to be betting themselves. So we need to start thinking, okay, if we do check and the flush bets and we check raise, what kind of bluffs can we have? Does it look like we can be bluffing? And I would say probably, yeah, it looks like we could have like 3-4, 6-3 suited, or 6-4 suited, which are boat blockers, which people love to turn into bluffs. So actually, it seems like a reasonable spot to check if we if we knew the opponent had a flush to get the maximum value. And obviously, all of these different variables, all of these different hands, they're really, really hard to kind of calculate on the spot. But these are the kind of things that should be going through your head. How you weight the importance of each individual variable is up to you, and really there's no correct answer. Obviously, if you put it into PO Solver, it'll give you correct answer, but that's not going to help you think anywhere near as much as trying to think of all these different variables and weighing up which one's the most important. Because when you're in a situation, you're playing against all of these different types of players and all of these different kind of spots, you need to know how to think. And just learning all the game theory trees just isn't going to be the most valuable thing you can do. You need to get practice of weighting the importance of all these different variables and making a decision for yourself. So, see what happens. So, Jozoniz ends up betting 550k, probably like 85 to 90% pot. Can't bother to work it out. And I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to get value from a flush or a queen. It's really hard to think of too many bluffs apart from the counterfeit 3 pairs now. And maybe something like, I don't know, like ace 5 with the ace of diamonds, but that probably just checks the turn because it has showdown value. It's really hard to think of too many bluffs. And in my opinion, Fernandez should just be folding this. I don't think people are going to go big. If they do bluff, I don't think they're going to go that big. And I just think there's way too many value hands that you can possibly have. And it just doesn't feel like people are going to try and bluff out trips or potential flush, especially going that size. And this is just one of those exploitive things that you learn over a large period of time, that in big situations, like deep in a huge tournament that's going to be life-changing for some people, people tend not to choose a big size to bluff into what is a very uncapped range. Joseniz can definitely have a boat, he can definitely have the flush, he can definitely have trips. People just tend not to bluff huge amounts into just all of these potentially awesome hands. And it's just one of the exploitive things that if you play loads and loads and loads of tournaments, you start picking up on these things. If I were Fernandez, I'm pretty sure I would fold, even though it's obvious to say that when you can see the cards, but I actually do think this is a quite straightforward fold. Let's see what he does.
With some kind of backdoor combo draw. Let's say he had ace 5 of diamonds or something like that. That would be a hand that he would lead. That would be a hand he could have check calling the flop and calling pre.
There's lots of stuff out there that beats a queen.
He's probably not leading the turn with ace 5 of diamonds, Maria.
So he's dipping into his time bank. He'll have to surrender at least one of those cards at the end of this hand.
Sorry for the audio quality, guys. There's a team coming.
It's a very impressive fold.
In like a month.
Can find it, but I don't think he can.
It makes the call.
He calls and loses.
What I'm gonna guess is that Fernandez just thought he was too high up in his range, especially with the Jack of Diamonds blocker. I don't know if he's a GTO player like that, but I think most explosive good professionals would end up folding. Maybe he was just like, well, I got trips, whatever. I don't know if he's a really good player, a really bad player, or what. But this looks like a very GTO-ish call to make. whereas I think a lot of exploitative players would decide to make that fold. And obviously there are going to be situations that GTO players will play better than exploitative players, but I think this is one of those situations where the opposite is true. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions specifically about the hand. Please let me know if you're a micro stakes player and you are better than me at poker and can tell me exactly what I did wrong. I love it when you guys do that. And see you next time, you information vultures.